Art has been a highlight of human society for a long time. It has evolved and changed to reflect society in various forms, and every viewer of every era seems to have a different stance on its meaning. Art itself is more of an abstract idea. There's no real definition of it, but most of us all love it anyway. In Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, Wilde looks at how each character values art and how these different perspectives of art reflect back on each of these characters. Throughout the novel, there are these two characters paired with Dorian in a sort of angel versus devil on either of his shoulders. They influence him and change him and mark a deep path for the boy throughout the story. To start, we have Lord Henry Wotton, the more cynical and devious of the two. As Wilde has stated in his introduction, all art is quite useless, and this is what Henry seems to somewhat believe in. He claims that art itself is the need for humans to have something that endures. As we struggle through life, that to actually value art is to fill our minds with rubbish and facts. It's no more than a pretty thing to Harry, something to view, to decorate, to lavish your abode for humanity's own pleasures. Why else would we keep it? In the same way he looks at Dorian, as just a pretty face. He marvels Dorian for his looks and nothing really beyond that, at least not initially. In the same way he looks at society. He sees it all as relatively useless with a few benefits in between. Harry is essentially the outlier between the three of them. He values art at an intellectual level and pays little to no mind to emotions. Art, to Harry, is almost a weakness of society. He'd rather see it burn than to have it compromise his own being. He doesn't let the emotions or ideas of art reach out to him. He always moves just beyond to enjoy from afar. He views art as he views society, quite primitive. As people do what they must to endure and survive, they create art to compensate. This distance that Henry keeps from art ultimately keeps him alive. Though he's corrupt and twisted, he fares much better than his soft and emotional counterparts. His emotional ties aren't as strong as Basil's or Dorian's to anything, especially to the portrait itself. He sees it as a neat little thing to have. He doesn't glorify it like Basil, and he doesn't obsess over it like Dorian. He quite immediately drops it once it's no longer his. The same way he doesn't look for the sole good in Dorian like the artist, and though he doesn't fight against his or Dorian's own wickedness like the subject. Henry is the only one not really affected personally by the portrait, but rather affects those around the portrait himself. He keeps himself above objects such as paintings, unlike the other two, and by doing so remains his usual self, unchanged and unscratched. Basil is quite the opposite of Henry when it comes to most things. In fact, Basil loves art, and it's his only real passion in life. He puts himself in his art, so much so that he even states that a picture of someone like Dorian Gray is still a rather stunning representation of himself, as he claims that there's too much of myself in this thing. Basil paints beauty. He doesn't do it for money or fame, really, but because it's a passion. It's a reflection of the beauty of society, kept intact and preserved for generations until the parchment itself withers away. To Basil, art is the ideals of life and reflects his perfect world. He puts himself in his art. He makes his art a perfect reflection of how the world could be. In a way, he's obsessed with his art the way that he fawns over Dorian. It's beautiful and pristine and perfect. Basil marvels at Dorian both on and off the parchment. It almost begins to be questionable if he can differentiate the two as separate entities. At heart, he's an idealist, looking for the good and almost outright ignoring the bad. He's engulfed in art in a similar way that Dorian is. He finds perfection in his work. He has Dorian sit for him and paints this perfect image of a perfect boy, and he tells himself that he's in love with this person. Really, though, Basil is in love with his art and is a bit in love with himself. He loves having this perfect model, but in the end, it's a mere physical admiration of beauty that is born of the senses. Basil has this painted idea of what Dorian is, who he should be, and he can't fathom changes that occur in such a beautiful individual. He paints Dorian in this rather flat lighting, and it ends up being his downfall. Basil can't comprehend what the end of beauty means, that something so wondrous can even lose its beauty at all. Even as Dorian turns his back on him, Basil still believes in the beauty of him, ignoring the claims of his friends and neighbors. He chooses to see this long-since faded part of Dorian that he believes he painted so long ago. And really, Basil's art is doing just that, reflecting the truth of Dorian Gray. It's Basil with his rose-colored glasses that never really understands how ugly can seep into things that seem so as permanent as a painting. As Dorian finds himself engulfed in this discourse between Harry and Basil, he seems to lean a bit on the artist side of the spectrum. Dorian seems completely ensnared with art in all forms of it. The second he sees his portrait, he's in love. He says to himself that it is a part of myself, which is similar to how Basil takes after it. He finds himself quite enamored in pieces of work, finding himself in paintings or the pages of books that he cannot free himself from the influence of. Dorian, like Basil, finds a personal meaning behind things, unlike Henry. It's eventually a downfall for the both of them, as the whole premise of the book is Dorian obsessing over his altered portrait. In a sense, Dorian is drowning in this world of art that Basil has created for him. Not only is he allowing Henry to rule over him, but also the more poisonous influences that come from his own temperament. The once beautiful Dorian Gray that Basil had known is being drowned out by this hideous portrait. Dorian is susceptible to get influenced, even by an inanimate object like a painting. He allows things to control the better part of him. He even lets his own emotions and the ugly side of himself take control. He's more emotional than Henry and more morally ambiguous than Basil, but in the end he's his own worst enemy. He wages war in the painting, and this painting represents himself. Dorian's biggest enemy is his own soul, and though Henry guides him down a twisted path, it was all Dorian's own doing in the end. Dorian constantly fights this war with himself, and it's seen in this rotting portrait. Even when he tries to do good, he continues seeing the bad and can't get past it. This evil side is pushing him down until it reaches a point where the good part of Dorian can't get up anymore. Dorian allows himself to become wickeder and wickeder until his moral judgment is so twisted and compromised that the only way to end it is to end himself. Dorian loved art and at the same time waged war on it. It reflects on his time with his two friends, the disdain for it all and yet the need to find beauty within it. By the end of the novel, Dorian is a personality split between two greater ones, Basil and Henry, and this leads to his ultimate downfall of destroying art, evil, and himself. Even by looking at just these three characters, it's evident that there are drastically different ways to view art, even in the same era. No one is going to look at a piece of art the same way another does. They won't find the same meaning behind it and value it like others might. There's no real right way to look at art, just as there's no real wrong way to create it. Art, in the end, and from the beginning of time, is something to look at. It's something to admire, and it's something for one to lose themselves in the most wondrous of ways, even if it's just for a second.